Hey, welcome to Super Social Club. I'm Jeremy.
This is Whiskey in the Six. I'm Rob.
Welcome to the Whisky Rant podcast.
It's a little crusty.
It's frustrating.
And it's going to be a little bit of a rant.
I don't understand it. I don't know why.
Some sort of injustice.
Anyway, end rant.
Hello and welcome back to the Whisky Rant podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Rob.
And tonight we have some Japanese whiskey on the table here.
We do have a lot of Japanese whiskey. I made a lot of enemies saying some things about Japanese whiskey in my first original rant.
Really?
Yeah.
When was this?
This was when I did the overrated, overpriced.
Yes.
The rant, like the one where I came off of that like dry month.
Oh, right.
It was
You were
crusty as hell.
Salty as hell, yes.
Yeah, it was so crusty. And then I just went off about so many different things.
Well, lots of stuff to rant about Japanese whiskey, namely the scarcity, the supply, and of course the price.
Yeah. I mean, it's creeping to no man's land. Like, I don't know how many people can afford it, but
Right.
It's just in a zone that's not even reasonable anymore.
So we'll jump into that. Also on tonight's show, we're going to get into some topics on WhiskyTube, mainly Bourbon Channels, and how the bourbon craze on WhiskyTube has taken off. Some of these channels gaining popularity at a huge clip, so we'll talk on that. Mm-hmm. And related somewhat to that, our secondary market find tonight. The Red Hook Rye made an appearance on a U.S. secondary group. If you're unaware of Red Hook Rye, we'll let you know all about that. Considered one of, if not the best American spirit ever bottled.
Yeah, the legendary Red Hook Rye. I've heard this story many times from our good friend Peter White.
Everyone wants to get a pour of that. Super limited, of course, and we'll let you know how much that bottle went for on the secondary because it sold for quite a large amount.
Terrifying.
So let's start with the Japanese whiskey. Our value whiskey tonight. Is there a Japanese value whiskey?
So our almost value whiskey of the night is the Hibiki Harmony.
Hibiki Harmony. So this is a blended Japanese whiskey, non-age statement. Hibiki has since dropped all of their age statements. But this one we found, I bought this for 100 Canadian dollars at the LCBO. Now you see prices of this increase to $130 at the LCBO. But as far as we're concerned, this might be the value buy as far as quality to price ratio.
Yeah, I think it's the most consistent. I think a lot of people swear by it. Mm-hmm. That's when they're referring to Japanese whiskey, they're referring to this one. This is not a single malt, right? This is a blended malt.
It is a blend.
It's a blend of different grains, right? I think there's... starts with a C. I can't remember the name, but they're also owned by Suntory, and they're in here as well. And that's a non-barley, I believe, producer.
I'll throw up a graphic just to make sure we're right about what is in this. But yeah, definitely a blend. What do you get on the nose on this? I really like this one.
Yeah, so when we first opened it, there was like a ton of like vanilla and maybe like even a hint of like a lavender kind of like note.
Yeah, there's like some floral aspect to it. There's definitely like some malty characteristic to this. Mm-hmm. Lots of vanilla, as you said.
Yeah, like cereal grain in there. And then it's almost getting like to like a meaty. There's like a meaty element in there somewhere. I don't know. Maybe that's the smoke that
There's a touch of smoke in this. I believe there's just a little bit of peat. Very faint, but if you dig hard, you can find it. And then on the palate on this thing, lots of viscosity. That's the first thing I noticed drinking this is like how viscous this is. Bottled at 43%?
Yeah, 43
ABV. The amount of viscosity you get at that proof is quite impressive.
Yeah.
And then like this like coconut note to it. Lots going on with this whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something maybe a little youthful on the palate. I get, but other than that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I like that little like challenge you get, that little fight back. Like at 43%, it drinks a little bit higher in my opinion.
Little bite on there as well. So lots going on with this whiskey. So like we said, it's hard to find a value Japanese whiskey nowadays with all these prices going up. You recognize this bottle, don't you? The Hibiki 17.
So funny story about this bottle. I bought this off of a dude from the U.S. And I got a great price on it. Well, great price at the time. It was like 170 American, which was actually really good at the time. Yeah. So 170-ish American. I can't remember exact details, but brought it in, popped it as soon as I got it.
Yeah.
And what was it, like 2 weeks later? the Hibiki Yamazaki, was it Yamazaki?
I think it was, yeah, they announced that they were dropping.
And Hakushu announced that they're
aged
dropping all their age. Well, I believe Yamazaki still produces the 18, right? But Hibiki officially dropped all their age
Right,
statements.
they were discontinuing all their stuff because
at that point.
Their stock was low. They couldn't keep up with demand.
So the bottle that I opened, which I had huge expectations for, which I was a little bit disappointed, I'm not going to lie, but that's also probably because my expectations were so high on this one. Went from 170 to what, like 650 or 700
So I
overnight?
remember watching this happen on the secondary market over a 2-day span and seeing bottles sell for $500, $600. So then people were asking $700 and selling them. It got up to almost, I think, $1,000 US for the Hibiki 17 before it came back down to earth and settled like around 600 or so. I think where it is now, 600, 700. But yeah,
it went nuts.
right before you cracked this.
Yeah, right after I cracked it. And it's funny because at the time I was trying to get the 12-year-old, and a lot of guys were saying, no, I'd rather give up my 17-year-old than my 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And so the 12-year-old was like highly touted. Yeah. And we were just looking up some prices on that.
Yeah, you look at Scotch Whisky Auctions, the UK auction site now, and the 17-year-old going for between 270 to 300 pounds, and the 12-year-old almost the exact same price.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's crazy
to see that.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. It's got to be much better, I guess, right? It has the hype around it, so maybe
it could be one of those. Yeah, I mean, like the sales of Japanese whiskey in general. I mean, I remember it going down to the States and seeing a Yamazaki 12 on the shelf for $90.
Yeah,
US.
Hakushu was like $80.
Sure. I mean, still kind of expensive, but now you're looking at almost $250 US for a Yamazaki 12 if you can find it. I don't see them that often, to be honest with you.
I remember going down to Florida and walking by it was just easily accessible on the shelf, $80, and I was like, dollars at par. I wasn't interested. Walked past it so many different times, and then I don't know what I ended up trying it, and I really like it. I think it's one of my favorite Japanese whiskeys that I've tried.
I do like this one quite a bit as well.
But, I mean, it's just insanely overpriced now.
So how did we get to this Japanese whiskey craze? I think you can cite Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible Review 2015, where he named the Yamazaki Sherry Cask, it's 2013 release, best whiskey in the world. First time he named a Japanese whiskey, giving that award. And then the snowball started rolling, I think, at that point in time.
It's crazy the power that Jim Murray yields in that Whiskey Bible. Whether positive or negative, he can inspire an entire nation/world to go buy an entire shelf of some whiskey, right? Like we just saw that with Alberta Premium Rye, a whiskey that we both liked well before Jim Murray talked about it.
Yeah.
And then
a whiskey we featured on this podcast, actually.
Yeah, we did, right? Yeah. It ended up being the whiskey of the year this year, and now you can't find it anywhere.
So we won't get into the current Jim Murray controversy. That's for another time, I think. So we'll leave that one sit.
We're gonna avoid what we don't know. We're gonna leave alone. Like we don't know enough about it to comment. So
sure, we'll leave that for another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, really, I think that you saw Japanese whiskey prices. I mean, I'm sure they were going up before then, but it kind of hit the mainstream at that point in time and really put a spotlight on Japanese whiskey, especially that Yamazaki, which goes for crazy prices now. I'll throw up a graphic on current UK auction prices for that.
We're so close to having a Yamazaki 18 in hand. Remember that? We were in a couple lottos. We won, but we decided not to.
Oh, there's a buyout.
Yeah, we decided not to buy it out because there was three people in the lotto, and then essentially the way these lottos work is if your number is hit but the lottery didn't fill, then you have to pay for the rest of the spots. You don't just get the bottle. So all these, there's a ton of spots, and it would have ended up being almost like what the secondary price was on that bottle.
It would have ended up costing us like $400 or so US or $500 US or something. So.
Which maybe we should have done because now you can get it for it's like what, $900?
I don't know.
US. It's about $900 US. I saw the last time. So
I've had a very small pour of it, and it was delicious.
I'm sure it's great. Is it 900 US great?
No.
I don't know. We've tried better whiskey, I think.
Yeah.
And for a lot less.
So another issue with Japanese whiskey is that nowadays, are you getting Japanese distilled whiskey in your Japanese bottle?
How terrifying is that, right? Like, there's no rule that says that they can't bottle other countries' whiskey and call it Japanese whiskey.
That's exactly right. So in Japan, there's really no regulation as far as being distilled in Japan and then being called Japanese whiskey. They can import whiskey from other places, bottle it in Japan, call it Japanese whiskey.
I remember getting some heat about this in that overrated, overpriced as well, because I do mention this, and guys are like, you don't know what you're talking about. And it goes back to like when people start talking about that 0.09% rule of Canadian whiskey. Like, a lot of people get that wrong. They don't understand that 9% or that 0.09% or whatever, sorry.
9.09.
9.09, sorry. Has to be an alcohol. Like, it has to be alcohol content. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, you can just throw juice in there. That's not true. Right? So maybe there's some of that going on in Japan as well. Like, maybe they can't officially call it Japanese whiskey on the bottle, but it's from these Japanese distillers, right? Like, we have an example right here. What is it? Nika bottling.
Yeah, so Nika, the company that owns them, owns Ben Nevis. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times what you're seeing now is you're seeing some Ben Nevis distillate in these Nika expressions. So I think what's happening is, like, these Japanese distilleries, Japanese whiskey producers, taking advantage of the Japanese whiskey craze right now, like how expensive these bottles are going for, can't necessarily keep up with demand, so they're bringing in other whiskey from around the world and blending it with theirs and shipping it back out.
Yeah. I find it very interesting that people are just so obsessed with Japanese whiskey, and like to the point where now nobody's releasing these age statements anymore. So I don't. Can you still get this Nika 21-year-old?
I'm not sure.
These are a lot of ex-Rob barrel bottles over here. The Hakushu I traded for a whole bottle.
So this was mine originally, right? I got this from UK auction, and then I traded it to you.
Yep.
And then you did some damage to it, and then somehow it got back
either
to me.
I traded back to you or I gave it to you. Couldn't remember that one. Might have been like one of those like late night whiskey gifts that I just like let you leave with.
Grab a bottle.
Yeah, just take a bottle. I call them whiskey bomboniere. If you're Italian, you'll know what that one means if you've been to an Italian wedding. The Hibiki 17, I think I also traded to you, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Once I brought it down to halfway or something like that.
Yeah.
And then same with the Nika 21.
Yeah.
That's like, I don't know if it was halfway or what, but so
if you look at global sales of Japanese whiskey, so Japanese whiskey selling outside of Japan up 9% annually, which is double American spirits, Canadian spirits, Irish whiskey, Scottish whiskey, double that. So the growth is just crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, and the prices come right behind it.
So I guess globally that's like the whiskey of choice then. That must be. If that's the case, then like people are choosing to drink Japanese over most types of whiskey out there, right?
It's crazy, right? Like how the popularity just is on this like ever climbing curve. I mean, and you look at people who collect, I mean, just, you know, the value of these collections, these portfolios of whiskey, just ever going up.
Well, we have a collector's item on the table tonight. Can we talk? Can we give them a little sneak peek?
Yes. So this is something super special. Tell them what we got here.
So we got the Karuizawa 1981, 33 years old.
Yeah. Distilled 1981, bottled 2013. This was
malt reviews, Narby, just like unbelievable gift.
Yeah. So if you're not aware, one of our biggest inspirations in WhiskyTube, Malt Reviews, Mike and Narby, they have a channel that specializes in, we say like very highly collectible museum piece whiskeys.
I think museum piece is the right term. Like I don't know if they coined that term, but they did. They may have coined that term. That's the right way to describe their channel. Their initial review, their first review was a Dalmore 50-year-old.
Yeah.
It was like around Christmas Dalmore 50-year-old. I'll never forget that. Just two really down-to-earth, really cool guys that drink some incredible whiskey.
Just epic stuff all the time.
Super
Nardi
nice guys.
was super generous and gave us a sample of this bottle at 60.3 ABV. It's a first fill sherry cask, like we said, 33 years old, 33, 34. One of the most sought after collectible brands right now.
Yeah, honestly, Jeremy looked at me like I was cheating on him when I smelt they smelt this. He's like, "You started without me."
How dare you?
It's like the way my wife looks at me when I watch an episode of a show that we're watching together. The nose on this is, dare I say, for the first time this year, bonkers. Like,
I mean,
holy
this
smokes.
is out of control good.
That's stupid. That is stupid.
I mean, you get that old sherry in this, like.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I almost feel bad ranting about Japanese whiskey tonight while enjoying something so legendary and epic.
So Karuizawa, they bottle a lot of their stuff all single cask. This one is a single cask, 240 approximate bottles. Cask number 6056. You're looking at secondary market prices, around 3,000 or so pounds. This is a $5,000 bottle almost.
Unbelievable. So, like, what hurts the most about that is that, like, it's just after this sip, it's basically unattainable. Like,
Right.
We'll never ever see this again in our lifetime.
We're gonna have to pause the podcast for sipping.
Go to that screen.
Wow, that's insane. That finish is out of control.
It's just like I don't know where to start because there's like a million things happening here. So it's funny because I remember watching this review on their channel specifically, and I think it was Mike that said this is like dinner and dessert all in like one dram.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to describe
And
it.
it's a great way to describe this because like it starts with this like almost like gunpowdery
I was just gonna say that.
like and then like leads into like a meatloaf almost
Right,
like
yeah, it's like very meaty.
like a gravy something like very like. But and this is gonna sound like terrible to some people, but it's phenomenal. Like it's ridiculously good. And then it gets sweet, and then there's this chocolate and dark chocolate and like a little bit of milk chocolate and coffee at the end.
There's like a little bit of like saltiness, almost like kind of like
And I'm still
soy
tasting
sauce
it.
almost.
Yeah, soy sauce is a good one. I'm still tasting it. I like the finish is unbelievable. Like it's 60%, so it's a high ABV, right? But was it 60.3 or 60.4?
60.3.
Yeah, unbelievable.
First time ever experiencing this distillery before.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I had no idea that this distillery even existed. To be honest with you.
Some of these expressions from this distillery go for crazy, crazy money.
So like, it begs the question. These guys are all taking a break on no age statements. Macallan did something similar to that. Now Macallan is coming out with every type of age-stated whiskey you can think of. They have a triple cask. They have a triple oak, double oak, single oak, right? Does that mean these guys will eventually start coming out with age statements again because they've taken such a long break? Like it's been, 3 years now?
I think so. I mean, you take a look at the whiskey boom in the last 5 to 7 years, every single distillery is ramped up production. So you have to figure, in another 5 years, you're going to be getting 10-year-old, 12-year-old whiskey starting to come out like Macallan is now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, where are we looking at the future of Japanese whiskey? Is it going to be back to where it was before? Price is going to go down? I mean, I don't see prices going down. That's the thing about once you've established a price in the market, you're really going to go below? I mean, I guess if it gets saturated that much, maybe, but...
Yeah. I don't know. It's disappointing because, like we had already said, like 3 of these bottles were once mine. the other one that I managed to acquire before everything like hit the brakes was the Yamazaki 12-year-old, which is also a very good whiskey. But we were just getting like to start going down that rabbit hole when everything like, you know, fell off a cliff and there was no longer age statements and everything was way too expensive. I remember South Florida Peat Lovers bought a bottle of Yamazaki 18-year-old for like $200.
Yeah.
No, it was less. It was less than...
I think they got it for like $125.
Yeah, it was less than the... I remember he was comparing it to the Macallan 18-year-old, saying that for like $100 more, he would have to buy the Macallan 18-year-old or whatever. So imagine that. In 6 years, a bottle went from $125 retail to now $900 on sites that are probably charging a little bit of secondary price on that. But I don't know if, like, are they still producing Yamazaki 18-year-old? I don't know. I have no idea. Like,
that's a good question.
I don't know, and I haven't seen it on an American shelf retail.
Right.
So, and what is retail on that bottle if it is being produced now?
It's just constantly fluctuating, right? I don't know. I mean, the future of Japanese whiskey, it's so unattainable that what are you going to do? I mean, look at Ralphie. He's even like boycotted reviewing Japanese whiskey because of the prices have just got out of control.
Yeah, it's disappointing. Like, I understand when like it's the, you know, supply and demand, and like I keep getting that thrown in my face when I like knock a Japanese whiskey, but none of these whiskeys, in my opinion, warrant anything north of $200. In my opinion, that's of course that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no,
but
I agree.
None of these warrant, and I'm talking like, okay, so let's say 200 American, just to make it level the playing field. But each one of these, except for the Hibiki Harmony, of course, is going for well over that. Well over that now. So I think I saw, the last time I saw this on a shelf, it was $800 Canadian. Yeah. The Nika 21-year-old. So what do you... They're not, the quality's not of that caliber, but they're being praised at that caliber.
Yeah, and then you're getting all these other Japanese whiskeys that are coming into the market at lower prices, but they're just not that good at all. Right. Like that Toki or whatever one. Yeah. You know, it's how much is it at the LCBO? $65 or so? 70,
something like
70
that.
Bucks.
Yeah.
Not very good at all.
I think there's a 15-year-old version that's $300 at the LCBO. It's a 15-year-old. What 15-year-old have you experienced in your lifetime retail that's $300?
Yeah, I know, right?
There's none. There isn't one. I think the closest thing that comes to it is the Macallan 15-year-old, which is $200 now. When it was first released a year ago, it was $150. They jumped the price $50 because I guess they had to be more expensive than all their no age statement whiskeys. Right. So $300 for a 15-year-old. There's no way I'm gambling on that bottle.
Yeah, it's easily the Japanese whiskey. You're either at the entry level spirits, which are not very good at all, or you got to go all the way up to buy something that's decent. I mean, this I guess is like the value buy, right? I don't know how much it is in the U.S. market. I mean, the LCBO bumps it up $30, but for $100, I would be recommending a purchase for that. $100 Canadian.
Yeah, I think you could still get that in Alberta for $100. Not at the LCBO, but it's worth a try. It's worth going down this road once just to say I tried a Japanese whiskey.
Sure, like what's the Japanese whiskey profile?
Yeah,
I think that for $100 is a good experience with it.
It captures it well. It's a blend. Keep that in mind. But I just wish this stayed the same price because at $80, which was expensive at the time, it was still worth the $80.
Yeah, I mean the Yamazaki 12 was great.
Yeah, so for those of you just listening, I'm pointing at it like a dummy and not realizing that you can't see what I'm pointing at. So I'm talking about the Hakushu 12 and the Yamazaki. I actually reviewed them on my channel head to head, and I thought they were both great whiskeys, but I got them both for sub $100 US, right? Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Japanese whiskey now, it's like buyers beware, right? Because you're not necessarily getting Japanese whiskey in your Japanese whiskey bottle.
Right.
I mean, we reviewed that Mizunara cask, which was not good at all. So yeah, expensive.
Right.
Young.
As soon as you put Mizunara, it's like, as soon as you put the word Mizunara on a bottle, you just increase the value of that bottle like $100 at least, if not more. If it's a Scotch with a Mizunara on it, it's at least $100 more than the standard release of that bottle.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so I think Japanese whiskey, not really on our radar for buying. Like, when's the last time you bought a bottle of Japanese whiskey?
Right here.
Right.
What was that? 3 years ago? 4 years ago?
Yeah, 4 years ago.
I won't. I refuse. I want to try the Yamazaki 18-year-old, but not at $1,000. I know it's not $1,000 whiskey. It was $125 retail at one point, and we're not talking like 20 years ago. We're talking 5 years ago. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's just not something I'm looking to buy right now. I mean, even like that Nika from the barrel, which is a 500 ml bottle, right? And like that's another thing. Are they gonna go with these like half-liter bottles that are charging 750 milliliter prices? Like, it's just an area of whiskey that is on the back burner for now, for me anyway.
Yeah, like a lot of people swear by that Nika from the barrel, but then I have like people I trust calling it a hot mess. You know what I mean? So
there might be some batch variants. I reviewed it on my channel. I thought it was okay. I think I gave it an 86 maybe.
Yeah. I wouldn't buy this again at $130. It's decent, but I think you can get a better Scotch for sub $100.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You can definitely get a better Canadian whiskey for sub $100, and you can get a better American whiskey for sub $100.
Right.
So why am I going to buy this bottle? I think that's what I want you guys to leave this conversation with is why spend more on Japanese whiskey when there's several other countries making better whiskey for less?
Yeah. I mean, unless you're balling out and buying like auction bottles, which are super, super epic and super high quality.
Like the Karuizawa here.
Like the Karuizawa. But again,
like,
you know, it's, $3,000 3,000 pounds at auction. You know, that's the level that you're looking at for something like that.
Like the Karuizawa is worth selling a child for. But you're not going to do that with any of the whiskeys other than this on this table.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. I mean, like really good Japanese whiskey is just for the wealthy and the collector at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Whiskey Tube topic tonight. And this was a Patreon request from Jesse. He asked, why do we think that bourbon channels on YouTube get so much popularity and grow so quickly?
So I got the short version and the long version of that.
Go ahead.
So I think it's like 60% of my viewership is American. So Americans consume a lot of YouTube. That's a statistical fact.
Yeah, and I'll throw up a chart right here that shows that.
Yeah. Bourbon is their home brew. You know what I mean? Like that's what they're making in their country. So obviously they're going to be patriotic toward it. Side note: Americans are patriotic. I don't know if you've noticed. I think that's kind of the most obvious thing that anyone could ever say.
Sure.
Americans are patriotic. They love their bourbon.
Yeah.
And they are going to support America. I've literally had people comment on my channel, "Oh shit, this guy's Canadian. I'm out of here."
Yeah.
Like literally, like verbatim. I'm not exaggerating. Someone has come on to my channel and said, "Shit, this guy's Canadian. I'm out of here."
Sure. I mean, yeah, you don't go to, your dentist to ask about cooking advice.
Yeah.
You want it from the head. So the chart I threw up, leading countries based on numbers that watch YouTube. United States, this is in 2016. 167 million people. Wow. That is almost 3 times the next leading country at about 70 million. So, yeah, they consume more YouTube, obviously, than anyone else in the world.
Yep. Bourbon
is the national spirit. So, yeah, I think that you look at YouTube statistics, like subscribers for these channels, it's Bourbon Night, over 60,000 subscribers in 4 years that they've been on. Bourbon Junkies, which are blowing up huge right now, 37,000 subscribers in about 2 years. Mash and Drum.
Our boy Jason.
Mash and Drum.
26 and change now?
Yeah, over 25,000 in 2 years of work. The Bourbon Night, almost at 20,000 for 3 years. So, yeah, I mean, like, these bourbon channels definitely get lots of notoriety, lots of popularity really quickly because, you know, you can go to a lot of these shelves in the US and find exactly what they're talking about. Whereas a Scotch, you know, maybe a little more scarce, rarity.
Yeah, there are a lot of American Scotch drinkers, which is our fan base. You know what I mean? That's the 60% of my fan base are American Scotch drinkers, pretty much. I mean, both of us do a pretty decent job. I think we, more than anybody else, do a variety of whiskey.
Yeah, I think, like, for our channels, whiskey is the theme, and it's just whatever we think is good, whether it be Scotch, bourbon, Canadian, or other.
Exactly.
You know, we focus
Japanese.
on Japanese. We focus on Scotch maybe first and bourbon right behind it.
Yeah. Canadian whiskey's in there sometimes. Irish whiskey. Yeah. I really love, like, it doesn't matter where it comes from. Well, you guys know. I mean, it's not a secret that I'm a big fan of Indian whiskey, and you know. So one area I would like to explore more is Australian whiskey, but it's just so damn hard to come by here.
That's the thing, right? Like, what can you get in your area? Like, that's really, you know, the main thing. Yeah.
It's what blows my mind the most is the Patreon support of some of these YouTubers,
right?
these American bourbon tubers.
Yeah.
I think they need a category of their own. Like, they can't be whiskey tubers anymore. They're bourbon tubers.
Sure.
Because, like, you have a bourbon channel, it's gonna blow up probably. Like, how many bourbon channels are there now? Probably a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, the guys that are putting out great product have been recognized for such and have huge subscriber bases, huge Patreon support, and all the power to them, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, bourbon is huge. Here's some stats. 2017, sales of American whiskey grew $250 million to $3.4 billion total. That's an 8.1% increase that year. So I mean, it's going crazy.
It wouldn't even make sense for us to focus our channels on bourbon, even if we loved it.
We can't get all the bourbon.
We can't get. How many store picks are there?
None.
Right now in the U.S., like probably in every store, like there's a store pick. Right? Yeah. Any store that's like that knows a thing or two about whiskeys decided to do a store pick. Yeah. You know.
How many store picks of bourbon does the LCBO bring in? Big fat zero.
We had those Maker's Mark ones. Do those count? Like I don't even think those count. Like
even the SAQ in Quebec did a store pick of Jack Daniel's. Single barrel proof.
We didn't get that.
No.
Alberta got one.
Alberta does picks.
Alberta does.
Other provinces
some great,
do. Yeah. Ontario, they don't give a shit.
No, they don't care. They care about the bottom dollar in Ontario, and it really affects us because they could be doing so much more because of their buying power, and bringing in some incredible stuff and making lots of people jealous, but they don't.
LCBO. Let's throw a tick on the LCBO sucks wheel.
Can we give them two? A negative.
Roll
2?
Another one.
Roll another. Because they just suck. Yeah. But I'm just wondering when the bourbon junkies are gonna give me credit for the top 6. I don't like. They keep using this top 6.
People keep biting your stuff left, right, and center. Over.
It's called Whiskey in the 6 for a reason. That's why I do top 6. Otherwise, it's top 5, top 10, top 20. Those are the generic ones. Bourbon junkies.
Why is Mash and Drum doing your overrated, overpriced?
He's doing it too.
Right? Man.
You know what? They're
taking all the credit.
I'm gonna call them the Milli Vanillis of the YouTube world.
Right? God.
Taking my material.
But no, like, awesome for them. Like, I think like the buddy system too, it seems to work well, right? Bourbon junkies, it's bourbon night with Chad and Sarah.
Yeah.
That kind of back and forth that you can kind of give with someone else seems like
the Whisky Rant.
Right? Sure, Whisky Rant. Yeah, you look at like Whiskey Tribe. You know, it's like that's some more entertainment value versus just one person on camera.
Yeah, I have a hard time going live by myself. Like I don't find it's fun for me. Like
flow has to kind of
like right? You're in a room and there's dead silence. You know what I mean? Like I enjoy that, like back and forth when you're over or whatever. You know what I mean? Like So absolutely, I could see why they're more successful, because people want to see two guys shooting the shit, or they want to see, Chad and Sarah have been doing their thing from day one, and it was cool, like watching them grow and like as friends, and then into a couple and all those other things,
sure.
right? So, yeah, I think the duo works. There's a reason why Batman and Robin were so popular. So who's Robin?
No one wants to be Robin in the Batman Robin scenario. So let's not answer the question. Throw it in the comments down below if you want to see what one of us is Batman. All right, moving on to our last segment tonight, the secondary market finds. Let's stay with the American spirits. I saw a bottle of one of the most renowned, one of the most expensive, and one of the most collectible American spirits in history, Red Hook Rye.
Yeah. So I remember hearing stories about this for a very long time, and how when it first came out, do you know what the retail on this was when it first came out?
It wasn't that much. So what you want to tell the story about Red Hook Rye? So there was a small liquor store, I believe in Brooklyn, New York, called Linnell's, and it was owned by what's her face? Tanya Linnell, I believe her name is.
Yep.
So yeah, small independent store. She got really involved with the spirit game, and did a barrel pick of some epic Willet 23-year-old and 24-year-old whiskey. Bottled it under the Red Hook Rye name, which is the part of New York where her store was. So I think what makes this Willet so good is that, one, it's super old, like 23 years old.
Yeah.
I believe the mash bill is 51% rye, so it's just a barely legal rye.
Yeah.
And they recast it. So they had it in, I believe, virgin oak, and they recast it into an ex-bourbon barrel. And those ex-bourbon barrels must have been epic, because what people say about this is just absolutely phenomenal stuff.
Yeah.
This one came up on auction. You want to guess how much the asking price was?
Oh, man. It's got to be north. Well, I've heard that it goes up to 30,000 American, but I think I'm going to say less. I'm going to say, like, what?
Right. So the asking price was 25,000.
There you go.
And it sold for 24,000.
Jesus. So imagine you bought that retail. You just put your kid through college with a bottle of whiskey. Like, congratulations.
Yeah, I know, right? And there's a really good episode on the Bourbon Pursuit podcast, which I suggest everyone who's interested listens to, because they have Linnell on there, and she talks about the whole process of these picks, and she did 4 barrels. I mean, I don't know how many bottles total. I think it's around 850 out of the 4 barrels that she did.
Yep.
Really interesting to hear her story about, starting up grassroots liquor store, and some kind of a sketchy part of New York at the time, and how it just gained a popularity, and how she brought in all these unique bottlings, and kind of the whole story is really, really interesting.
Can we legally drop a clip of that, real quick? Just
of course, fair use.
Yeah. Let's do that.
So take us through selecting that whiskey.
Well, as you know, there were 4 barrels, and the first barrel, Drew and I, with a couple other folks, were just in the warehouse, literally just walking over barrels and popping bongs and tasting whiskey and passing it around, and yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And that number 1 is still my favorite of all 4 barrels. I mean, it was really just being able to pick kind of the cream of the crop. The barrel was phenomenal.
Yeah, we'll throw it right there. It's her and Fred Minnick and the other people from Bourbon Pursuit. Really interesting, really good podcast. So definitely check it out. So probably the most expensive American whiskey for sure.
So what's the new Eagle Rare go for?
Yeah, that goes for a lot too, almost 20,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's in a couple of years. That'll probably, and that's mainly just because of the decanter, because the liquid nobody even knows. Honestly, I don't even think the master distiller doesn't even know, because he's let's just bottle that in the fanciest thing you can find, and we're gonna sell this for $10,000.
Well, I think the rarity of Red Hook too. I mean, there's only they did 4 barrels, 850 out of all that, so we have 200-ish 200 and change from each barrel. I mean,
crazy.
you listen to this podcast. She doesn't have any left. They're like, how many bottles you got left? She's like, none. She's like, she sold all of her remaining stock to invest in different endeavors. But I mean, there could just be very, very limited. You know, like a handful of bottles left of this circulating.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal my buddy Dave's line and say she's not a bad girl for wanting to, make a little coin off of her initial creation.
Yeah, I mean,
if anybody deserves it, it's her, right?
Yeah, I mean, she had the palate to know, walking through Willett's warehouse to be like, oh, what's this one? And then picking, what she thought was the very, very best. And yeah, I mean, cool that Willett even like sold her those.
Yeah.
And bottled them under her name, because I mean, according to her, those were their best bottles. And like, how often do you get a 23 or 24-year-old rye whiskey?
Yeah, it's that serendipity moment, right? Like, it's what made Bowmore Black become what, a $50,000 bottle, and like it's those it's that Macallan 10-year-old cask strength that was once $80 on the shelf, you know what I mean? And now like try to touch it.
How much would you pay for a pour of this, realistically?
This Red Hook Rye?
Red Hook Rye. What would you be willing to throw down?
Just to say I did it, can we do it like on the channel, or like, because it does matter for me if we were able to record this experience.
Okay, so let's say that someone opened a bottle, they were selling ounce pours, and what would you be willing to pay?
I'd pay $1,000.
I would say $1,000.
I'd pay $1,000.
Yeah,
I'd pay $1,000. And people are looking at us like we're insane right now. But you know what? Like, you're talking about literally, like, and this is what bothers me about American whiskey in general. This probably can go towards what we were talking about earlier of Japanese whiskey as well. They call it limited, but it's coming out every year. So really, is it limited? It's not fucking limited, right? It's a yearly release.
Yeah.
Pappy, George C. Stagg, William Llewellyn, all the BTAC stuff. These are yearly releases. These are annual releases, meaning they have enough stock that they know they can release this every year.
Yeah.
We're not talking 10 bottles. We're not talking 100 bottles. We're not talking 2,000 bottles. We're talking
25,000 plus of George C. Stagg at least, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I think at some point, like a couple of years, they've had like 50,000 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there's an insane amount of bottles coming out, and obviously there's more bourbon drinkers than there are bottles. But we're talking about a rye that only had 850 something. What was it exactly?
850 for the 4 barrels, right? So about 200 or so. And this was batch 1 that sold, so it was the batch 1, and regarded as the best one.
Right. So batch 1, 800 and whatever bottles.
Like 225 bottles probably.
Crazy. So, yeah, I would pay $1,000 for that dram, but I'll never pay that for pretty much any other bourbon.
No, I mean, like, just to say that you've tried Red Hook Rye, very, very few people have that honor.
Yeah.
So it's something kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the people that love rye, this is what they obsess over. Like, this is their unicorn, the bottle that they've dreamed about for years. I know our good buddy Peter White has talked about this time after time with me, and he longs for it, right? Yeah. So I could totally see why he would pay maybe $1,000 for a shot of that.
I mean, I've had a 9-year-old Willet Rye, paid I think $45 a pour for it.
Wow,
very expensive bottle.
Yeah,
absolutely loved it.
There you go.
I mean, I can't imagine something
24 years old,
23, 24 years old.
That's insane.
And not just that, but also I think that the way that they recast it, listening to Linnell talk about that was really what maybe put this one in the honey barrel category, as they say, like the cream of the crop, the top of the top.
So I really like when bourbons do that. I really like when like ryes are done that way. Like I love Michter's toasted barrel stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I do think there's something to that. And if Michter's comes out with a Michter's toasted barrel rye that's 20 years old, I think people would literally kill each other for it. Like, there would be like a riot to get that bottle, because I love it at the no age statement, probably only 5, 6, 7 years old. maybe a blend of that.
Yeah.
So I can imagine.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us. Let's mark the Hibiki Harmony. What are your score on this bad boy?
So, I do like it. It's not making me want to go buy a bottle, to be honest with you. Although this is our bargain, technically we should be guys. It was hard for us to figure out a Japanese whiskey that we could highly recommend. That's a value pick. If you have to try a Japanese whiskey, if that's like on the bucket list, go buy this for $130. I'm gonna give it an 83, I think.
Okay, I'm 86 on this, and I think that the $100 price point, it was justified. I know it's $30 more now.
Yeah.
If you want to get a Japanese whiskey of good quality, I think this is probably where you're gonna have to start. I mean, I think that all the stuff that's on the lower shelf now is just not worth it at all.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be disappointed.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's out there. Maybe there are some gems. We haven't tried them yet.
That's true. I mean, like we said before, is there a value Japanese whiskey right now? It's hard to pick one. Right?
I'm hoping that company, the name eludes me right now, but I'm hoping that company that we tried that sent us a bottle, we didn't love that whiskey, but they're confident enough that like they're sending people bottles and they're trying to get their name out there. So maybe they're going to produce something a little bit more to what we're hoping for.
Let's hope we can get some Japanese whiskey that's good quality at a fair price, but we might have to hold our breath a little bit more on that.
What would you score that Karuizawa?
I don't know.
That's a tough one,
It's got to be one of the best whiskeys I've ever had. I mean, like, the thing I like about this is that it's constantly changing, and you get new notes every time you nose it. You get new notes every time that finish hits you. Mm-hmm. That's where I put a high score on some whiskey. So
just do it for fun. Everybody's wanting to know.
I mean, it's a very, very safe 95 for me, at least.
Cool.
I mean, like, just going back to this nose now is like just blowing me away even again.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's
like epic. The nose now is just, it's 96. I'm going 96.
96. That's the highest score I think you've ever given.
I'm going 96. I mean, this is just out of control. Good.
It is epic. It is epic.
It's everything I like about it, right? It's like it's heavy, thick sherry,
and
it's got this complexity to it where it's super unique. Like this is not like a whiskey I've had before.
No. The only you know what it does remind me a little bit of is that Mortlock 31-year-old that we bought. That G&M Mortlock. I honestly don't think people know enough about how good that is.
Yeah. Because you get that like that old dusty sherry, right? That old kind of dankiness to it.
Yeah.
And then you can
it reminds me of it a lot actually. Like they have a lot of similarities. I bet you if you had them side by side, people would think they're from the same distillery.
And now like that finish is all like cinnamon. It's like Christmas cake. It's got everything. This thing is just crazy.
Yeah,
it's absolutely crazy.
So we should hit up Mike and Narvi and see what we can do to buy the rest of that bottle.
Yeah, how much do you want to sell that for? You bought it at retail. You can give us a good price,
right? Give us a good price on the last third of that bottle, and we'll call it a day. At least we'll get a little bit more, and we can actually do a review on it.
Yeah. Well, what are you scoring it? Just throw it out there.
I don't think you're far. Like, I mean, I hate having to mark something
on one pour.
Yeah. But if this is the consistency that you would expect from that entire bottle, then yeah, you're right there, like 95, 94, 95.
Crazy.
I'm there too.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us. Thanks so much for joining in. If you're watching this on YouTube, check out the podcast on all major podcast streaming services. If you're listening to this on that, check out YouTube. We review whiskey there. So until next time, guys, have a good one.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.